Thank you. Okay, so today we're here to discuss the data protocol. Everybody did receive an email, and in the email I asked you to bring a copy of your assessment, a copy of your standard analysis, and a copy of your item analysis. So hopefully everyone has all of those documents. I do have a brief agenda that I want to make sure that I touch each one of these components. The first thing is the snapshot student self-assessment. Is anybody familiar with the snapshot student self-assessment? Yes, okay. I would normally probably ask you to explain it to me, but I'll be a little cordial and somebody just let me see the back of one of your assessments real quick. Aha, thank you. So on the back of every assessment, every student has the student self, it's actually called a student self-reflection, okay? And so this document, I believe, is something that if you're not currently using with your students, I believe that it is something that you should use or allow your students to complete because it gives the students accountability, number one, and then they're able to know where they stand. They know what standards they have mastered, and they know what standards they still need support on. And I think the students should be able to know what's going on with their own learning. When students know what's going on with their learning, it helps you, right? Okay? So anybody using that already?
Yes.
Yay! Woo-hoo. Okay, so that's really good that we're already using it. Can somebody give me like a shout out on how it is working for you? Yes.
Okay, for my students, it allows them to get ownership. So when we go through each of our snapshot questions, they are able to shade in, and then they look back. If it's 2 questions, it's like 50%. So I know I didn't do well on that, so I pull that teach for fast focus, what Ms. Vera gave me,
Yes.
and we target that particular teach.
Yes, and most of this stuff that we're going to be talking about in this data protocol, these are things that you already do as a good teacher. You already look at your data. You already try to figure out what do I need to do to help my students to get where they need to get. This particular protocol that I'm going to share with you today is just a place that you have everything all in one sheet, maybe 2, depending on how much you need to type. But it's a 1-pager that you can go ahead and plan out your action steps for reteaching standards that your students did not accelerate on, and then maintaining the ones that they did. So everyone has a copy of the Wainwright Elementary School Goal Setting and Action Plan for Snapshot Assessments. I do want everyone to know that we, moving forward, will be completing this protocol for each snapshot assessment. So I'm going to that today. Our I do will be me explaining the protocol to you, and then the we do will be me modeling or showing you examples of how to complete the protocol. We actually have one filled out for 4th grade math already, and then the you do will be you having time to go ahead and dive into completing one for yourself for your snapshot 1 data. So everybody looking at this sheet, we're going to just go over what each component is or what each column is. So the first column says snapshot assessment results. In the snapshot assessment results, you would put your class average. The class average is found on your, on the standard analysis report. If you go to your standard analysis, and you don't have to go right now, but I'll show you on this one. The standard analysis report, it shows you the district average, and then it also shows you your average, your class average. The one I printed here is for 4th grade, the whole campus average for 4th grade. So for this one in particular, it was 53%, which means that the average score with the 4th graders that took this test was a 53. So you would write 53 in that class average for that, for this class. So whatever your class average is, that's what you would write in yours.
You would write it up here,
Just write it in this little box, yes.
This one?
And I can actually just show y'all by using the one that I did. Yeah, I have plenty.
Cambió
Here.
63.
And we have also downloaded this document in the hub, and I'll tell you exactly where it is. So some people may feel more comfortable typing it versus writing it. So for this particular one was 53%. Did I achieve overall class goal? In order to know if you achieved your overall class goal, the assumption is you had a goal, right? So let's just say you didn't have a goal. What would you want your goal to be? Go ahead and develop that goal. Let's say 70%. So if yes, that's definitely acceptable.
So would I write that?
So you don't have to write your goal. You
Just
know the
say,
goal.
did I
You
achieve
could
it?
write it, but did you achieve it? Yes or no? For this case, no. The goal was not achieved. The next box is the standards that we rocked, or encouraging progress. So these are the ones we want to celebrate. When you look at your standard analysis, on the very first page of your standard analysis, you will see a graph. This graph is very helpful because, especially if you have access to a color printer, but you don't have to. We can make it work, right? But this red line is the mastery percentage line, which is set at 70%. So what this says is that anything above the red line, of more than 70% of your students mastered that standard. So for this one in particular, we have 4.2C. This is above the red line. It's actually far above the red line. It's actually past 80. It's like 80, over 80%. So more than 80% of the students mastered this standard. So that is a standard that we would consider one that we rocked. We did amazing on. So if you look at your graph, anything above the red line, we're considering it a standard that you rock.
I wouldn't have touched it.
Hey, we'll count the touch. We will count the touch. Okay. In the session before, I had one that was like, but it's 68.2. I said you can have it. You can take it. Okay. So you can take it. You rocked it. Okay. So you identify the ones that you rock. After you have identified the ones that you rock, the next question in the gray says maintenance plan. What was effective about your teaching of these standards, and how will you leverage your do nows, your exit tickets, etc., to maintain these standards? So if you notice, both of these boxes are gray, and they're gray on purpose because they go together. So when it's asking you how are you going to maintain those standards, it's talking about the standards that we just put in this column of the ones that we rocked. So because this particular grade level rocked these two standards, then you need to, the first thing in the maintenance plan is to identify what was effective in your teaching. The only way the only person that knows what was effective in your teaching is you. You're the only one that was in your class when that lesson was taught. So that's when you have to think to yourself, how did I teach this lesson? Was this lesson more engaging than some of my other lessons that I taught? Have I had more time with my students on this concept? Have I been introducing this in the do nows already? Is this something they've had more experience or more exposure to? Whatever it is, that's a first part of this maintenance plan, identifying what you did that worked. Because maybe what you did that worked for that standard is something that you can incorporate to the standards that the students were not successful on. So the second part of that maintenance plan is, okay, amazing. Most of your class rocked this standard, but you taught this standard in September. What happens if we never teach this standard again? We never touch it. What's going to happen? Gone. Just like the Spanish that I learned many years ago, that my parents paid a lot of money for me to get a degree. My undergrad degree that actually says I have a Spanish concentration, but yet I don't speak Spanish. You lose it. You use it. You don't use it, you lose it. And pretty much, this is the same thing with this maintenance plan. If we don't continue to allow it to be spiraled back in, the kids may or may not remember it. More than likely, it's the may not. Okay? So is everybody clear on those three so far?
Yes.
Perfect. So the next part is now blue. All of this blue goes together. Okay? So the first blue one says standards for whole class and small group reteaching. So we're gonna identify the standards that we need to reteach whole group, and we're gonna also identify the standards that we need to reteach in small group. So anything below 50% mastery, we're gonna consider that we need to reteach it whole group. If less than half of my students didn't master the skill, then it's probably something that the whole class can benefit from a reteach on. Okay? So you're gonna look at that same document. What I did is I just drew another line at my 50%. Therefore, anything below my second line that's at 50% is what I would identify as being below 50%, which is identifying it as a whole class reteach. Some of you may have more than others. When I did mine, I ended up having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 6 below 50%. Realistically, there's no way possible for me to reteach every standard in a whole group setting because I still have to teach my current curriculum, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to focus on getting the most bang for our buck, so picking the standards that are the most impactful to reteach. What does the most impactful look like? It could look like something different for each of you. For my brain, it says, I have these 6 standards, but 3 of them are readiness standards. I'm gonna focus on the 3 readiness standards. Some people may feel more comfortable focusing on the ones that were had the least percentage passing. That's totally up to you. I think what's important is that we're selecting 3 high impact standards that we're going to reteach, and that's going to help the students to be able to be successful on those standards, okay? So if we're reteaching 3 impact standards to the whole group, that's going to be something that helps everybody, okay? That doesn't mean that we're going to forget about the other standards. We're going to talk about those in a second, okay? So, and we're going to talk about why I identify those and what we're going to do with them in a few seconds. So the next one is anything between 50 and 70%. We're saying that anything between 50 and 70% is going to be small group. Because what happens, and of course, if I have my 50, I have my 70, that's anything that falls in between here. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more standards that fall in between 50 and 70%. Let's think about, we have 70% students, 70% of the students mastered the standard. What about the other 30%? What does that mean about them?
Depends on the class.
If 70% mastered it, what does it mean about the other 30%?
It might be RTI.
Well, yeah.
It's more,
But even at just the basic level, if 70% mastered, the 30%, did they master it?
No,
They did not master
they
it,
don't know it.
right? So 70% mastered it,
That
but you have that
doesn't mean-
30% that didn't master it.
Right.
Well, if my child is in that 30%, I don't want you moving on.
Exactly.
I don't want you just saying, well, honey, the most of the class got it, so we good. No, Benjamin needs a small group, right? And so Benjamin is one of those 30% of the students that didn't do it. So that's why we're saying this would be identified as a small group. Most of your class got it, but there's still some kids that didn't. You think about it, that's also the reality of the ones you rocked. The ones you rocked are above 70. Even if it's at 90%, there's still 10% of your kids that didn't get it. We're not gonna leave them behind. Which one of those presidents said no child left behind? Okay, still a reality. We're not leaving them behind, right? We're still not gonna leave them behind. We're gonna give them the opportunities that they deserve by giving them a small group reteach, okay? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yes,
Just checking. Make sure y'all still with me. Okay. So far, we've identified the ones we rocked. We've talked about the maintenance plan for the ones we rocked. We've identified the ones that we would identify as whole group and small group based on below 50% and between 50 and 70%. Now, this next column says, what did scholars understand? We're talking about what did the scholars understand on the standards that they did not master. Because just because you didn't master a standard doesn't mean you didn't understand the whole